It's Tuesday, the 17th of January 2017. I am still Robin Yellow, and this is Techtasm episode 43, your plastic pal who's fun to be with. And with me again, because nobody else is as plastic, is James Woodall.
Plastic fantastic. How you doing, Mr. Yellow?
Yeah, very good, very good. Yes, I've put CES behind me now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And moved on to the next thing. And James, if you will indulge me, this week let's take a look at the EU wanting to grant legal status to plastic people, Apple raising its prices, and Facebook testing fake news filtering. And we'll be judging these stories and some others to tell you if they are a Techtasm, which is a blend of tech for technology and tasm for phantasm, something that exists only in a person's mind. So without further waffle, let James get on with the show.
So in The Independent this week, Mabe Ullman has written, as he mentioned in the title, about the EU voting on whether or not robots should be declared as, and I quote, electric persons. So what they're
electronic persons.
Electronic persons, yeah. So what they're effectively getting at, thank you for the correction, is that if a normal person, if that I'm allowed to use that phrase, makes a mistake or does something wrong, they are liable for that. If a company makes a mistake, then they, as an entity, are liable for that as a whole. And what this EU Parliament proposal is that if robots do something wrong, they should, of course, be held responsible for the acts or omissions that they may do. So, I mean, it's still in draft. It's tabled by Maddie Delvaux-Stairs, a socialist MEP from Luxembourg. And basically what she's saying is the rules are insufficient in the current technological revolution. So what do you think about that?
Well, and I've always liked the fact that the EU generally and Europeans specifically have tackled these difficult social issues ahead of everybody else. We're always thinking in Europe, yes, the UK is still part of Europe,
yes,
about these sort of grand visions. And I think actually we should be doing more planning, James, to prepare for the legal future of AIs, bots, robots, things at the moment where clearly we can anticipate, because of the advance of technology and our experience of technology, that these things, these conflicts are going to happen. A robot car is going to kill somebody. Actually planning for it legally, starting now, seems like quite a good idea to me, James. What do you think?
It does, but, if a person does something wrong, they get punished. Prison, fines, whatever. A company does something wrong, they generally get fined. A robot does something wrong, what? I mean, do you tell it off? Naughty robot.
Well, so I guess one of the things they might want to look at is, so this goes to the nature of what constitutes a being. So let's take a dumb animal, a mouse. Does a mouse have any rights?
I don't know.
Well, it's got some, isn't it? You can't go around
it's got rights,
lopping the heads off mice willy-nilly just for a laugh.
Rights, but not responsibilities, right?
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Maybe what they're trying to drive here is behavioral programming and inhibitors that companies will put into robots so they can adhere to the law. Because at the moment, actually, the people that are making these robots are having to make value judgments. And the example I gave about robot cars killing people is quite a good one, because somewhere somebody has already written the code which is going to decide who dies. A pavement full of pensioners or a baby in a pram. They've already written the code to do that. Or if they haven't explicitly written the code, they've defined the parameters under which these robot vehicles will run. And I would say that given that has already happened, it's the responsibility of the legislature and also socially responsible states to understand the other side of the coin, which is, who's at fault here?
But wouldn't that be part of, say, a corporate entity being at fault? Because they are the ones, say, for example, in my day job, if we write software and products, we're responsible to a degree for what happens to them. And
well, here's a difficult. And of course, science fiction writers have been writing about this nonsense for 50 years, 100 years, particularly Isaac Asimov. If you create an artificial nervous system or some kind of AI brain that takes the factors it has, and you can't actually show the specific piece of logic that would deliver a predictable outcome, would, this robot dog in one particular set of circumstances do A and in another set of circumstances do B? I.e., could it be judged to be as unpredictable or difficult to predict as a human being, and therefore perhaps needs a bit of protection? Because remember, law is not only to protect you, the victim, but to protect the individual as well. So it works kind of both ways. And actually, by setting some rules and by saying that if you create a robot dog, it will have some rights, it kind of, it forces you to think about the moral conundrum of creating artificial life. I don't have the answers. I've got no flipping idea, but I know there's 100 years of sci-fi which thinks it knows the answer to this.
Yeah, definitely. It feels very academic at the moment. Like, not discussion for discussion's sake. It's definitely useful for those questions. But I mean, a robot has a right. You can't abuse it, but then it doesn't have a consciousness. So, if you take a company or you take a person, there's detrimental effects if you're mean to it, for example. I mean, if you're mean to a robot, well, it doesn't understand the concept of that.
Well, what happens if it does? What happens in order to do its job better? It understands it has a consciousness. So say you've got a robot, consciousness that does grief counseling, and it says something rude and upsetting. Can you just smash it up? Or can you actually call for its neural net to be shut down? Or can't you? I don't know. If it's just an algorithmic piece of electronics, then no one cares. But what they're saying is that actually the rate of progress with AI is so much that actually we're going to have to start considering the impact of killing an electronic life form. So you're right, it's a totally academic exercise. And the Luxembourg socialist MP, Maddie Delvaux-Steres, is obviously trying to make a name for herself by tabling this. But I think it's interesting because while we can have a little bit of a titter about it now and call it a massive techtasm and a stupid waste of time, in a few years' time, we're going to have to start seriously thinking about this stuff. Yep.
Oh, I don't know. It feels a bit techtasm-y today, to be honest. But
well, feeling a bit techtasm-y is all we're going to have to be able to take from that one, James, because I'm going to move on. Our friends at Apple, as reported by Mac Rumors this week, are hiking the price in their UK App Store by at least 25%. Why do you think this is, James?
I want to thank David Cameron, perhaps, for this.
Thank you, Dave. Dave, of course, this is to do with Brexit. Now, in the United Kingdom, Apple is having to raise the prices for its apps and in-app purchases by 25% in light of the weak pound exchange rate, which has been down against the dollar by 19% since the Brexit vote. And of course, Apple report their earnings in dollars. Therefore, in order to keep the earnings up, they've had to boost the cost of 79p apps are going up to 99p, and £1.49 apps are going up to £1.99. Now, subscription prices won't be affected. I wonder if the cost of iPhones will be affected as well, James.
I think they'll probably have to be because, I mean, Apple makes them, even though they're made in China, they're priced on the dollar. So, because all of those big companies like Foxconn and whatever else, they work in dollars. So,
well, Chinese currency is pegged to the dollar, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think if it doesn't happen for this iPhone, you may find the next one is more expensive than the last one with no explanation. Because I suppose there's a difference between making an app from 79p to 99p to changing a phone from £500 to £600, right?
Well, I think at the kind of ludicrous rates that Apple phones are charged, nobody's going to notice, so I don't think it'll affect it. But yes, I mean, if you slap 25% onto the cost of an iPhone, people are going to notice, right? I mean, they're going to notice. The thing is, the cost of all the Android phones are going to go up 25% as well. Why? Because they're all made in China too, and China's currency is pegged to the US dollar, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
I think, all right, maybe the story here is, of course, that while the pound has gone down only 16, I say only, it's gone down 16% as of this morning against the dollar since the Brexit vote. Apple are putting up their prices by 25%. So either this means that they are anticipating a bigger move, or 79p rounds up nicely to 99p, and 149 rounds up nicely to £1.99. I suspect it's probably the latter, don't you think?
Yeah, it probably would. I mean, people are commenting, of course, that it's now in line with the US pricing. But, of course, the US pricing, isn't it slightly different? Because
they don't include tax.
Yeah, in the UK, we do build in tax. In the US, they don't. So, I mean, it's still slightly cheaper than it would be in the US. But, I mean, a few people, though, are commenting in the comments further below. And I do enjoy the clip from Anchorman as you scroll down in the comment section of this particular article. Somebody asks, and if the pound recovers, they'll go back up, right?
Oh, yes, the good old price goes up, but it never goes down argument. Yeah.
I think that's what we should be calling the Techtasm on.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there. Who was that? Andy91. Yeah. That almost certainly will be done that way. Also, these are digital goods. And, you know, why? I mean, they are digital goods, right? I mean, it's not like anybody's losing money on these. These goods have been made. These electronic products have been made, and they carry no cost of maintenance. They exist in the ether at a very low cost. The cost of storing the original code and replicating a few copies of the actual executable around the world so they can be installed. There's no actual uptick in the running costs for this.
Well, it
so
depends
this is
on the app, though, right? If you're buying an app where for 99 cents it gets maintained and you get new versions every 3 months, well, there is a cost there, isn't there? Because there's a cost to the developer to keep doing that. It depends on the app, right? If it's a one-off payment for an app that never changes, agreed. But remember, there's a person behind that.
Yeah, but then you've got to remember the economics at play here. Putting it up to 99p will reduce the number of apps people install, simply because that's the ludicrous way that people think. Of course. If it goes up £1, then less people. So actually, they could be not increasing the market at all, and making any difference whatsoever. So I'm a bit stunned by this one. I think the whole thing is stupid. The
interesting thing, though, with what I just said, is the developer doesn't actually determine the price. So Apple, if what you say happens, which is less apps are sold, Apple putting the price up is hurting the developers, and they have no say over that.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So, okay, let's move on. In Engadget this week, John Fingas, we've certainly spoken of a couple of his articles before, is talking about how Facebook are testing fake news filtering outside of the US. So, fake news, it's been in the real news quite a lot over the last week, where a lot of people are saying that fake news stories, i.e. where something is a ridiculous headline but is dressed up on a news site to make it look real, was a major factor in the recent US presidential election. There's a couple of obviously concerns with that, you know, because people are vulnerable and easily led. That's a discussion for another time. But basically, Facebook has been targeted by certain law enforcement, media types and whatever for basically saying you've allowed this to happen, because people post anything on Facebook, right? It's a swamp and it needs to be drained.
My question is, how would you spot it?
Well, supposedly what this says is, so Facebook are trialing this in Germany because the country is proposing a new law that would impose hefty fines on websites for failing to take action against fake news. So what Facebook are doing for this trial is whenever somebody posts a news story, I don't quite know how you determine what's news and what's not, it's automatically sent to a third-party fact-checker. And if that story is deemed false, Facebook will flag it. And what they will then do is if you decide to share that story, you'll be warned, and it won't be automatically prioritized because the Facebook news feed is there's some careful algorithms behind it that determine what rise up the page and what doesn't. So I mean, it's a bit vague. Third-party fact checker is the answer to your question.
Yes, but so what you're saying is that humans are the only people that the only device by which you can spot this stuff is to have some humans review it and take a view.
Yes.
Let me give you an example of some fake news stories. See if you can spot them. Right. Newsweek reported in May the 9th last year that interrogators had desecrated a Quran at the Guantanamo Bay site. True or false? Fake or real?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that sounds like it could be real.
It's fake. Okay. Rothergate. CBS has an unreliable, mentally unstable man with a grudge against George Bush giving them copies of documents that he claimed were received from a person nobody had been able to prove exists. So this was rubbishing Dan Rather, who was a CBS News anchor.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they're very close, aren't they?
It's fake. I'll give you a clue, James. These are all fake, right? Okay. NBC's phony exploding GM truck. Dateline reported November the 17th. 14 minutes of balanced debate capped by 57 seconds of crash footage that explosively show how the gas tanks of certain old GM trucks can catch fire in a sideways collision. Fake. Jason Blair scandal at the New York Times. I mean, the list goes on. The Rolling Stones rape story about an assault on campus at the University of Virginia. Fake. So what's happening is that actually the fake news itself, all it has to do is sound convincing and you're going to believe it. But critically in this sort of post-truth era, you've got to want to believe it, or in some cases you know it's fake but you want it to be true so much that you propagate it around to try to influence others. So while you yourself are not caught out by the fakeness of the news, you want to use it as an instrument to see if you can catch a few gullible people by passing it on. So if I read a news article, all right, about some fake news, which I know is fake, which I happen to know is fake, I can use my position of power and influence with you, James, to ping it on to you. And because it came from me, you probably won't even think about, well, hopefully you won't. You won't even think whether it's true or not. You say, oh, it came from Robin, therefore, and he's a straight shooter, therefore this is probably true. So you probably won't put in the kind of intellectual work to make your own decision about whether it's true or not. You'll just take it on face value, and that's why fake news is insidious.
But and to be fair, we have had this problem, if you will, for years. I mean, I know you're familiar with The Onion, one of the greatest websites in the world. Yeah. That is satire, and there's a lot of times where people have taken Onion articles and misinterpreted them and thought they were real. I mean,
they're idiots.
Yes, but there was one where North Korea took a story from The Onion thinking it was real about North Korea.
Yes. Was this something to do with Kim Jong, or what's his name?
Kim Jong-un's haircut, I think it was. Or...
No, it wasn't. He the sexiest man alive. Voted
yes,
sexiest man alive for the third straight year. And they put it round like it was true. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was picked up by North Korea itself. I mean, but so what's the difference between satire and fake news, I guess?
One is propaganda designed to push a political agenda. And satire is supposed to be so ridiculous. And satire only works in context. It works in the context of a satirical soiree, a satirical radio program, a satirical TV show, a comedy act. You know, satire only works when it's obviously not true. And the problem is that fake news, while it can, you can have satirical fake news like you've got with The Onion, but it has to come from The Onion and is often accompanied with the most ludicrous photos, pictures, mock-ups, lash-ups and video shorts taken clearly with actors with bad wigs to make it look. It's the fact that it is convincing is what makes it hilarious. The problem is people are so stupid that they will go for it. And the fake news industry, because that's what it is, has obviously jumped onto this bandwagon and produced some of the most creative and intelligent fakery that you've ever seen. And the problem is that when you do it during an election, it can have an impact on the democratic process, and then it gets really serious.
Yeah, I mean, I've got The Onion up at the moment on my other screen, and the stories are completely ridiculous. Like Joe Biden is sadly realizing that this could be the last time he throws a lit firecracker into a press conference. with, of course, a mock-up image of Joe Biden holding a lit firecracker.
Brilliant.
And I see the difference, and I'm so glad that I'm able to look at The Onion while doing the podcast. That makes me happy.
I think that this sort of algorithm will be able to get rid of a lot of fake news, but I think we're at the point now with the state of the art on fake news creation that the algorithm is going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think it's going to chuck out as many real stories as it does fake stories. So, it's a very difficult balancing act. We're never going to get rid of it. I'm glad to see this sort of tech. And also, by the way, I don't think this is a techtasm, James. Shall I tell you why? Because having seen, and I'm working on the state of AI at the moment, I can see that it is eminently possible to pick up very nuanced things in written text right now using AI is perhaps even better than humans can do it. So I think if AI is the right solution to this problem.
Let's move on.
Okay, Nissan, would you believe, are going to test driverless cars on London's roads next month. Will you be driving around London, James, next month?
That's quite impressive. Is this the first case of a London-based driverless car?
Well, it's more than that, because while Google has been testing its own autonomous vehicles on public roads near its headquarters in California, Nissan have claimed that these driverless cars in London will be the first to hit public roads in Europe. If that is, of course, that Nissan receives final approval from and I'm quoting here from Ars Technica, Tom Mendelsohn, from an undisclosed local authority in London.
What does that mean?
Well, it means we don't know where it is. Otherwise, I'd be out there trying to spot this thing. Apparently, the model of vehicle they're using isn't expected to be made commercially available until at least 2020. I don't know whether that means they're going to be testing a prototype future vehicle, or whether they've taken an existing Leaf, current model Leaf, and just equipped it with technology which won't be commercially available till 2020. So I'm not 100% sure what Tom Mendelsohn means by that sentence.
That's really interesting, though, because so I wonder if they will be doing any advertising for it, and have a little. I mean, they do say, it clearly says by Tom here in the article, secretive tests. So I suppose we all know what that means. There'll be secret tests.
Well, obviously they want to do this sort of testing secretly, so that the road conditions aren't affected by gawkers, that people don't feel at risk or in danger, which of course they won't be, I'm sure, and that somebody doesn't deliberately try and smash into one just for a bit of fun. I'm going to give you two questions about Nissan and one really interesting fact, James, if you're up for it.
Yep.
Okay. How many cars, what percentage of cars made in the UK are made by Nissan?
Oh, they make a lot, don't they? I mean, they've got the big plant in Sunderland. I'd say probably 10-20%. It's probably a big number.
33%, one in three.
No way. Wow.
Yep. How many jobs across the supply chain in Britain does Nissan provide?
Ooh. Okay, well, I'm familiar with another car manufacturer in the UK who I think employ about 3,000-4,000. I'd say 10,000, 11,000.
40,000. And the final one is a fact, which is more cars are made at... by the way, this is not verified, this fact, so please take it with a pinch of salt. And feel free to send us in at feedback@techtasm.com. More cars are made in the Nissan factory in Sunderland than are made in the whole of Italy.
Wow. Well, hang on. What? Okay, the Italians, though, they're supercars. I mean...
Well, obviously they don't make as many volume cars. They make a few, don't they? Like the Fiat 500. I would have thought.
But is that actually built in Italy, though?
Oh, good question. I don't know. Anyway, more cars made in one plant in Sunderland than the whole of Italy. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's quite impressive.
Not sure there's a techtasm here, James.
I'm not too sure either, but let's keep talking while I find out where the Fiat 500 is made.
Oh, okay. Well, look, all right, I would say that I think they're definitely going to do this test. The question is whether it's going to be success or not. Now, if it's a massive failure because they're doing it all in secret, nobody's ever going to know, and therefore it won't shut the program down. So almost, I would say that they have to go through this test to determine whether their driverless system is actually working, but the outcome will not be impacted by the test. This is just part of their usual testing routine and regime, and if it goes well, it doesn't make any difference compared to if it goes really badly, because if it goes badly, they'll just go back to the drawing board, fix it again, and then do another secret test. So actually, what they're doing here is not that newsworthy.
Yeah, very true. Well, I've got those numbers for you if you're interested. Okay.
Go for it.
So, well, not numbers necessarily, but in Italy they make, for Fiat, they make the Alfa Romeos, the Giulietta, the Giulia and the Stevellio. No, never heard of that. They make the Maseratis. The Jeep Renegade is made in Italy.
Is it?
Oh, there you go. But, I mean, you would have actually... Oh, okay, the Fiat 500 is mainly made in Poland. Okay, so...
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. That's very interesting.
There you go. So I'm guessing, yeah, you're right. Italy doesn't make many cars. I mean, Maserati can't shift that many, can they? So, yeah, okay. Well, isn't that interesting?
It is. Is there anything else interesting this week, James?
There is. Finally, we're going to talk about the EU privacy rules.
Hurrah.
Kelly Fivash in my favourite website, Ars Technica, and obviously emphasis on the Ars of Technica,
Yes.
has written about how the EU is changing and looking to change the privacy rules to strike back at Facebook and Google, who've managed to find a way of getting around them. So basically, now this is quite a complicated article, so I'll try and dumb it down and make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of privacy settings in the web. Okay, opt-ins for things, opt-out. So as you know, when you're moving around Google, the adverts that you see are linked slightly to things that you've done. So if you're going on Amazon and buying a DVD, you might likely see an advert on the rest of the web for that DVD, for example. Okay. And basically, there's a lot of cookies that track those kind of things through, Google, Facebook, etc. And effectively, Google and Facebook have found a way around some of the privacy settings that may be required for other places. So one of the things they're talking about is, rather than having an opt-out system, which is what exists today, certainly on Google Ads and whatever, there's an opt-in system where privacy is on by default. So it's a little bit complicated, but I mean, effectively, look, it's the same with tax law, right? Government makes tax law, accountants figure out a way around it. Privacy law has been made. Tech companies have found a way to figure out how to get around it because their entire business model is based on ad revenue. So,
well, of course, because they're protecting their shareholders come first. As with any corporation, shareholders come first, not regulations. I mean,
I think what they're basically hitting at is, for example, Google itself is covered under some of these privacy laws, but Gmail is not. And that's because Gmail is slightly disconnected from the ad experience. And, for example, Facebook is bound by them, but WhatsApp is not, because WhatsApp sits on top of Facebook. So I guess what the EU wants to do, and they're playing a bit of a cat and mouse game, right, with these companies. So what they're trying to do is bring them back in line. But what's also interesting in this article is that, those pop-up warnings you get for cookies, the consent boxes.
Yes.
They are being proposed to be scrapped because basically they're ridiculous. They
are totally ridiculous.
Because effectively what's happened is, whether your website has a cookie at all...
Just to explain to many American listeners, in the European Union, whenever you visit any new website that's publishing content for the first time on any browser, on a machine, you get a pop-up which says, this site uses cookies, you must consent to agree to us tracking you with cookies, or you can decline them. A lot of websites I go to, you can't even decline it, can you?
No, I just put one on a website a few days ago where you basically just, okay, I agree, and if you don't like it, close the website.
Yeah.
So the law was designed for tracking cookies that watch what you do, again, due to ads and that kind of thing. But the problem was, it was a bit of a catch-all, and it included websites, for example, that use cookies to store what's in your shopping cart. Well, you kind of automatically consent to that by agreeing to shop on the website, so therefore you wouldn't mind those cookies. So I think what they're trying to do is change the law, so if the cookie is used for non-privacy intrusive cookies to improve the internet experience, then those will be allowed. But cookies that count the number of things you look at and whatever else for tracking and whatever, those you'll still need to have a warning for. But again, it's cat and mouse. Lots of things will change, and I don't know. It's all a bit silly.
Yeah, so I like the fact that the regulatory body is looking to take care of the experience and make that better. But what they're doing is they're cleaning up their own mess. I mean, they've created this stupid law in the first place. I mean, at the end of the day, let's look at fake news. What are they going to do for fake news? Have a warning on every news site saying this news site may contain fake news. Okay, cancel. I mean, it's just ludicrous what they're doing. The internet works in a certain way, and it is down to the individual whether they need or want to know how it works or how it doesn't. I mean, when I watch television, I don't need to know how QAM and multiplexing and DVB-T works. I don't need to know any of that stuff. I need to know I press the button and video and sound comes out of the screen. And I think with cookies, I mean, it's putting it front and center, but it is so annoying and so invasive. I mean, you do get used to it after a while. I'm used to it now, but it still makes me seething mad that the EU would interfere with this. But it's good to see them backtracking on the mess they made in the first place.
Very true. Very true. I mean, yeah, I think there's... is there a Techtasm here? I mean, they're always going to be cleaning up their own mess and making more mess because that's just the nature of kind of law making, right?
I'm conflicted between the need to have regulation and interference by government bodies to protect its citizens and for us to have a smooth, frictionless, pleasant experience on the web which makes our digital lives and our physical lives better than it was before. So this is always going to be a point of contention. As far as the EU is concerned, it looks like they're maturing in both their understanding and their outlook on this sort of thing. But I would just say this, that governments and regulatory bodies and judges just don't understand tech. And they should get some proper learning down their necks or get some proper professionals in that can tell them the right answer. There aren't enough people that know how tech works, working in the public sector, in the judiciary, in the EU Commission. And there are too many people with old-style legal training and political training who are creating these laws, and they're just a lot of the time they're a joke. So I would say if there's anything, the Techtasm is the way that technical oversight is given to the internet by people who aren't qualified to do it.
Very true. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, we did talk about South Carolina government wants to put porn blockers on PCs.
Yes, that's right.
Brilliant.
That might have been fake news, though.
Well, very
now
true.
that I think about it, it may have had the whiff of fake news.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, well, hey, it is what it is. I completely agree. I don't think it'll change, though.
Well, it's a shame, James, but that's it for this week. Listeners, you can find us at facebook.com/Techtasm and contact us at feedback@techtasm.com. We record every Tuesday at about 9 p.m, so watch out for next week's show. This is me, Sir Robin Yellow.
And me, Mr. James Woodall.
Asking the question on your behalf. Is it real or is it just a Techtasm?